Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The court of Riverside, a small American town with old-world charm, echoed with the murmurs of spectators. Files piled up on desks, and the sun filtered through the tinted windows, drawing golden stripes on the waxed parquet floor. Today, an ordinary case of vandalism would seem trivial, but the atmosphere was charged with an invisible tension. In the center of the room, behind his imposing desk, the Judge Harrison, a man in his 50s, looked at his files with an air of superiority. His stern face and critical gaze were known to all. He was used to judging, correcting, and above all, never being contradicted. Then the door opened. A black teenage girl entered, her calm, sure steps betraying a confidence rare for her age. Her eyes shone with intelligence, and her face expressed determination. Maya Johnson, 15 years old, was coming before this court for the first time. She was not impressed by the intimidating aura of the judge or the murmurs in the room. Harrison stared at her and couldn't help but chuckle. A teenager here to stand up to me, he thought, his tone betraying his contempt. He hadn't known that Maya wasn't your average teenager. She had studied law the way some teenagers study piano, accumulating knowledge and skills with prodigious talent. The room held its breath. The audience thought they were witnessing a simple reprimand from a naive young girl. No one suspected that what they were about to see would shatter all their expectations. This judge, about to belittle her, was about to discover that he had underestimated her. A true legal prodigy. The bell rang, signaling the opening of the hearing. The murmur of the room gradually died away, giving way to the courtroom-imposed silence. Maya Johnson, dressed in a white shirt and a plain skirt, walked to the center of the room. Each step seemed measured, each movement controlled. Her hands, clasped in front of her, betrayed a confidence few teenagers possessed. The Judge Harrison, he looked up from his file and regarded Maya with a penetrating gaze. He was used to seeing young people trembling in front of him, stammering their answers. But here, there was something different. A quiet glint of defiance shone in Maya's eyes. He frowned and, with a condescending smile, said loudly, "Very well, miss, what was your name again?" "Maya Johnson, Your Honor," she replied in a clear, steady voice. Harrison chuckled to himself. Johnson. A young girl, barely out of school, is standing here defending her ideas, he thought. He'd already decided he was going to make fun of this teenager a little and make her look naive in front of the entire room. He addressed her with barely concealed irony. "Are you sure you understand what we're talking about here, Miss Johnson? You're still just a child." Maya looked up at him calmly. His face remained impassive, but her mind analyzed the judge's every gesture, every expression. She knew that beneath that arrogance lay a weakness. Harrison underestimated those he deemed inferior. A spectator in the background murmured, "She doesn't seem impressed." Maya smiled slightly, but without arrogance. She simply replied, "I understand perfectly, Your Honor. And I am ready to explain my point of view." Harrison blinked, surprised by the girl's confidence. He wasn't used to being confronted with such self-assurance. The entire room held its breath, knowing that this confrontation was about to exceed all expectations. The judge, thinking he could still ridicule her, prepared to ask his first question, without suspecting that Maya would surprise him in the next few moments. Judge Harrison, sitting behind his massive desk, crossed his fingers and stared at Maya with a mixture of amusement and condescension. "Very well, Miss Johnson, explain to me how you intend to present your case," he said, emphasizing the word case, as if to emphasize his doubts about her ability to understand anything. Maya took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the judge. "Your Honor, I understand that some may think that at my age, I lack the experience necessary to argue a case. But I believe that each argument must be evaluated on its own merits, not on the basis of who is presenting it." A murmur rippled through the room. The audience was surprised by the teenager's maturity and confidence. Even the prosecution's lawyer, Mr. Thomas, frowned, puzzled. Harrison hadn't expected this answer. He tried to regain control of the situation. Miss Johnson, you are aware that you are here in court, not in a classroom? Yes, Your Honor, Maya replied calmly. And I am here to defend my rights and present the truth, just as any decent lawyer would. The judge gave a condescending smile, thinking he could trap her. Very well, let us explain then. Why should I take your words seriously? Maya, with almost surgical precision, replied. Because truth is ageless, and the law is never wrong when properly interpreted. If you let me state the facts, you will see that my arguments are based on solid evidence, not supposition. Harrison felt a pang of concern. Never before had a young face dared to speak to him like that, let alone in his courtroom. He realized that this teenager wasn't just confident, she was intelligent and ready to confront him. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Witnesses, jurors, and spectators exchanged astonished glances. A teenage girl, facing a judge with a reputation for arrogance, dared to stand her ground with calm and logic. Harrison knew he had to find a way to maintain his authority, but he was beginning to realize that underestimating Maya could be a grave mistake. It was the beginning of an intellectual confrontation where every word would count, and where Maya had already taken a head start. At the back of the courtroom, David Parker, a young assistant attorney in his 30s, watched the scene with increasing attention. He had seen many young people plead, but none exuded Maya Johnson's focus and control. Every word she spoke seemed calculated, every sentence constructed to be both clear and impactful. David leaned slightly towards his colleague. Did you see that? She's not shaking, she's not stammering, she's standing up to Judge Harrison like it's a game of chess. His colleague shrugged. She's just a kid, David. The judge will put her in her place. David shook his head skeptically. No, there's something different about her. I've heard it spoken at local legal conferences. She's been arguing complex cases at only 14. If the judge continues to underestimate her, he risks losing complete control of the hearing. Meanwhile, Harrison, for his part, tried to hide his astonishment. Every sentence Maya said contradicted his initial impression that she was naive and inexperienced. He frowned and tried to regain control of the situation. Very well, Miss Johnson, tell me why you believe the accusation is incorrect in this particular case? Maya took a moment, calmly scrutinizing the judge, before answering. Your Honor, the prosecution's case is based on conflicting testimony and partial evidence. If we examine the facts carefully and in accordance with established legal precedents, it becomes clear that the version presented is incomplete and biased. David Parker felt a thrill of admiration. He knew she was not just a brave young woman, but a legal prodigy. Her relentless logic and mastery of legal language put Judge Harrison on the defensive, and for the first time, his authority was truly challenged before the court. The spectators were beginning to sense the impending reversal. The judge's arrogance in the face of Maya's youth and skin color was colliding with a wall of intelligence and precision. David knew that this trial would become historic, not only for Maya, but for everyone who witnessed this confrontation. And as he took notes, David realized that the outcome of the hearing was no longer a question of procedure, but of respect for the genius. Judge Harrison sat up straighter in his seat, thinking he could regain control. Very well, Miss Johnson, if you insist, explain your reasoning to the court, he said with a hint of irony in his voice. He was convinced that, despite her confidence, this teenager would eventually stammer under pressure. Maya nodded slightly and stepped forward with a steady step. Her eyes swept the room, but rested most firmly on the judge. Her voice, clear and firm, filled the space. Your Honor, if you allow me to present all the facts and evidence, you will find that the accusation is based on inaccurate interpretations and not on the reality of the events. Harrison felt a twinge of nervousness. He had never seen a litigant, let alone a teenage girl, speak with such poise and confidence. He tried to rein in the situation with a more stern tone. Very well, but remember, the court is not here to listen to abstract theories. We want facts. Maya smiled slightly, aware of the effect her words already had on the room. She removed a small file from her satchel and placed it gently on the judge's desk. Exactly, Your Honor. Allow me to guide you point by point through the evidence, testimony, and applicable legal precedents. Every element I present is verifiable and directly related to the facts of the case. The entire room leaned forward, captivated. Even the prosecutor, accustomed to inexperienced litigators, began to listen attentively. Judge Harrison, for the first time, felt the anxiety of being intellectually outmatched by someone he had underestimated. David Parker, sitting in the back, gave a small smile. He knew that from this moment on, the dynamics of the courtroom would change radically. Maya was no longer simply a teenager who had to defend herself, she was taking the initiative, dictating the pace of the trial and challenging the judge's very authority. As Maya began to methodically and thoroughly present her reasoning, the room realized that Judge Harrison's arrogance was about to crumble. Every word, every piece of evidence, every argument served to build a wall of intelligence that even the judge could not ignore. The turnaround was underway. What Harrison thought would be a simple hearing would become a lesson in humility, not only for him, but for all those who believed that youth and skin color meant incompetence. Maya took a deep breath and began to present her arguments with a precision and clarity that left the room speechless. Your Honor, she began, the charges in this case are not based on facts, but on inaccurate interpretations by witnesses whose accounts are contradictory. Let me show you point by point. She opened her file and took out several perfectly organized documents and notes. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, was meticulously annotated. Here, the main witness claims to have seen the incident at 6:30 p.m. However, as the CCTV receipt shows, the person was in a different location at that precise moment. A murmur rippled through the room. Even the prosecutor, Mr. Thomas, frowned, impressed by Maya's thoroughness. Harrison felt his ego falter. He had never faced a litigator, especially not a teenager, capable of deconstructing her cases with such confidence. Furthermore, Maya continued, several legal precedents support the fact that partial evidence cannot constitute a conviction. In the case Dawson v. Riverside, the court established that. She quoted the law fluently, recalling decisions from higher courts, and explained how each legal principle applied directly to the case at hand. Her voice was calm but firm, her pace measured, each sentence hitting just the right note. Judge Harrison sat behind his desk, stunned. Every time he thought he might regain control, Maya had already anticipated his objections and presented a logical and irrefutable response. His arrogance was beginning to crumble before this young woman's self-possession. The audience exchanged stunned glances. How could a teenage girl possess such knowledge of the law and such analytical skills? Even David Parker, sitting in the back, couldn't help but smile in admiration. Maya concludes this first demonstration. Your Honor, the truth, the evidence, and the law are on my side. This case is not based on assumptions or impressions, but on verifiable facts. I therefore ask you to carefully consider these elements before making a decision. A heavy silence fell over the room. Maya's intellectual power had just caused a complete upheaval. Judge Harrison, for the first time, realized he had underestimated this teenager. The lesson would be harsh, but inevitable. The silence in the courtroom was almost palpable. Judge Harrison sat back slightly in his seat, his fingers tapping nervously on the wood of the desk. Never before had he faced a litigant capable of challenging his authority with such skill. And above all, he never would have imagined that a black teenage girl could possess such legal intelligence. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his control. Miss Johnson, he said, his voice trembling slightly despite his efforts to sound impassive, how did you acquire such a level of knowledge? Maya looked at him calmly and confidently. Your Honor, I have studied law since I was a child. I have spent years observing, learning, and practicing. The color of my skin or my age in no way diminishes my understanding of the law. Harrison felt a mixture of surprise and embarrassment rise within him. For the first time, his arrogance was confronted with reality. He had judged Maya before even really listening to her. And now he realized he had been humiliated not out of malice, but out of his own underestimation. David Parker, sitting in the back, mentally noted the judge's reaction. Harrison was clearly overwhelmed, but he hadn't yet completely lost his authoritative posture. However, every word Maya said made his ego wobble a little more. Witnesses and the audience exchanged astonished glances. Whispers could be heard, "She's incredible, I've never seen anything like it." Judge Harrison, for his part, felt his world turn upside down. What he had considered a simple hearing was transforming into a masterclass in humility. Maya continued, relentless. "Your Honor, this isn't about me, my age, or my color. This is about truth and justice. And justice demands that every piece of evidence be examined rigorously, without prejudice." Harrison looked down at the file she had placed on his desk, silently acknowledging the accuracy of her analysis. He realized then that he had just underestimated someone exceptional. His astonishment mingled with a form of silent respect, the beginning of a humility he had never known in his career. For the first time, Judge Harrison realized he was no longer the one in total control of the room. And Maya, with her calm and poise, had just proven it. The murmur in the courtroom gradually rose to a whisper of admiration. The spectators, who only minutes earlier had shared Judge Harrison's condescending laughter, now leaned toward Maya in astonishment and respect. Even the prosecutor, Mr. Thomas, looked away slightly, impressed by the clarity and force of Maya's arguments. His colleagues and the witnesses were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something exceptional, a teenage girl challenging the authority of a judge known for his arrogance and doing so with astonishing legal mastery. Harrison sat behind his desk and felt his control slipping away. Every time he tried to intervene, Maya anticipated his objections and responded with unnerving precision. He tried to mask his frustration, but his furrowed brows and nervously drumming fingers on the wood betrayed his agitation. "Miss Johnson." He tried, his voice more strained, "You are impressive, but remember that this court demands concrete results, not demonstrations of competence." Maya looked at him calmly, a slight smile on her lips. "Exactly, Your Honor. And the concrete results are found in the evidence I have presented and in the contradictions I have noted. My goal is not to impress you, but to demonstrate the truth." A respectful silence followed his words. The entire room seemed to hang on his every word. The murmurs turned into exclamations of admiration. "She's amazing. How can she be so young and so bright?" David Parker, sitting in the back, made a mental note. The dynamic had completely changed. Maya was no longer just defensive, she was dictating the pace of the audience. Harrison, for the first time in his career, was no longer the dominant figure in his own room. The judge, aware of the evolution, tried to regain his authority, but each attempt failed in the face of Maya's relentless intelligence. The spectators and the jurors understood that Maya's youth and skin color were not limits, but that her talent was real and unwavering. This reversal of the room marked a decisive turning point. Maya had earned everyone's respect, and Harrison had to face a truth he had ignored for too long. The battle was no longer just legal, it was moral and symbolic. After several minutes of argument, Judge Harrison remained silent, his jaw clenched. He realized that every word Maya said was a challenge to him, but this time it wasn't just opposition, it was a lesson in humility. He took a deep breath and looked down at the file she had carefully placed before him. The evidence, the legal citations, the references to precedents, everything was perfectly organized and irrefutable. Harrison realized then that he had made a major mistake in underestimating Maya simply because of her age and skin color. "Miss Johnson," he said finally, his voice calmer, almost hesitant, "I must admit that you have surprised me. Your mastery of the law and your capacity for analysis far exceed what I could have imagined." Maya looked him straight in the eyes, but without arrogance. "Thank you, Your Honor. My goal is not to surprise, but to defend truth and justice. The law must be respected, without prejudice and without discrimination." Harrison felt a pang of shame. He realized that his initial behavior, his mockery and arrogance, had been unfair. For years, he had judged others too quickly, based on appearances and prejudices. Now, he had been confronted by a superior mind, and he could only acknowledge the lesson. The murmurs in the room subsided, giving way to silent respect. Witnesses and spectators understood that Maya was not only a brilliant teenager, but a moral and intellectual force who had just reminded the judge what justice truly means. David Parker, sitting in the back, gave a small smile. He knew this moment would be etched in the memory of everyone present. Harrison, despite his position, had just received a powerful reminder: underestimating someone, no matter their age or appearance, can lead to a brutal but necessary humility. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, visibly changed by the experience. Maya, however, remained calm and collected, knowing she had accomplished more than just a plea. She had planted the seeds of respect and awareness in the mind of a man who had long believed he knew everything. Within days of the hearing, news of Maya Johnson's performance had spread throughout Riverside and beyond. Local newspapers spoke of a teenage, legal prodigy, who had challenged Judge Harrison with impressive intelligence and skill. Social media was ablaze with people sharing excerpts from her argument and praising her courage. In the legal community, Maya's reputation began to spread beyond Riverside. Lawyers and judges in other counties were learning about her name and accomplishments. Law professors and legal mentors contacted her family to offer internship opportunities, speaking engagements, and even legal research projects. David Parker, still impressed, contacted Maya to offer to work alongside him on more complex cases. "You have a rare talent, Maya. What you've done in court is not only impressive, it's historic," he told her admiringly. Even Judge Harrison, despite his initial pride, could not remain indifferent. He decided to publicly acknowledge Maya's merit and correct her past behavior. At an official ceremony, he declared, "Miss Johnson has demonstrated not only exceptional legal knowledge, but also exemplary integrity and courage. She is an example to us all." For Maya, this recognition was not an end in itself. Her goal remained justice and truth. However, she understood that her experience in court had changed something in the way others perceived her. Youth, gender, or skin color should never be barriers to intelligence or competence. The audience at the hearing still remembered how she calmly deconstructed the judge's arrogance, and many were inspired to believe that even in the face of authority, truth and talent cannot be ignored. At just 15 years old, Maya Johnson had become a symbol of perseverance, justice, and genius. The doors of the legal world were beginning to open before her, and it was clear that her career would be exceptional. A few months after the historic hearing, Maya Johnson was no longer simply the teenager who surprised Judge Harrison. She had become a symbol in the legal community and beyond. Universities, law firms, and civil rights organizations sought her expertise, fascinated by her ability to analyze complex cases with exceptional poise and maturity. Judge Harrison, for his part, had changed profoundly. The experience with Maya had forced him to question his prejudices and arrogance. In his future hearings, he now treated every litigant with respect, aware that talent and intelligence could be hidden behind the most unexpected appearances. Maya, despite her success, remained humble. She knew that every victory in court was not a personal victory, but a triumph for justice and truth. Her parents were proud, but aware that their daughter's soul resided in her determination to defend those who had no voice. One evening, as she left the courthouse after a day of work, Maya turned and looked around the building. She remembered the day she first walked through those doors, faced with Judge Harrison's arrogance. Now she knew that moment had marked the beginning of something much bigger. His future looked bright, litigating complex cases, inspiring young minority talent, and, above all, reminding everyone that respect and justice are not linked to age, gender, or skin color. The courtroom, once a site of ridicule and prejudice, had become the stage of her rise. And for Maya Johnson, the young legal prodigy, it was just the beginning of a career that would mark the history of American law. Judge Harrison, watching this ascent from afar, could only acknowledge his luck at having witnessed this prodigy. Maya had taught him a lesson he would never forget: true authority lies in respect, intelligence, and integrity, never in arrogance or prejudice.